Hey team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. Today is the 22nd of May 2023, and this is a Ukraine war news update. Let's get straight to it. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. Literally outside my house now are 3 police cars and a meat wagon. Well, not outside, just opposite my house. It's a very quiet neighborhood. Older people come here to die, basically, and they don't sell their houses. And that's happened. Ooh. So I think it was some people getting a patio built opposite us, and the workers there, they kind of got patted down. They had to pack their van up. So I don't know whether they had stolen goods to make the patio or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, highly controversial in our neighborhood. Let's get straight to random. Let's get straight to not straight to the general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day. Before all the usual caveats apply, I find these indicatively useful. They do give a reflection of the sorts of activities that took place the day before. 720 liquidated personnel is higher than it has been. Apart from yesterday, we've ticked into the 700 mark. So I think that represents obviously activity around Bakhmut, but I think as well activity around Avdiivka. There was a report reporting from Ukraine talked about how there have been several attacks that have been really expensive for the Russians. They've lost a vast number of mechanized equipment as well as troops. There's talk that in one of those attacks, 40 troops are lost and I think 5 vehicles. And there have been a whole series of those attacks have been really attritional for the Russians there. 2 tanks. Now, it's interesting that we haven't seen on the tank losses, those vehicles that were spotted behind Mariinka in Petrovsky district, 10 T90s. I don't know whether they were definitely taken out. There's been no evidence of that. There was claims that HIMARS took them out. You would assume they must have taken them out. Having video footage of those tanks, they just had to have been taken out. The Ukrainians wouldn't have left a battalion or a squad of T90 tanks just sitting there. So anyway, 9 APCs, 20 artillery systems, and 1 multiple launch rocket system. 20 artillery systems. Again, we've had in the 30s and then sort of 4 days in the 20s over the last week, and the rest in the teens, the high teens. This is an extraordinary number of artillery pieces taken out. Just incredible. And again, what does that reflect? That the Ukrainians are explicitly targeting artillery, possibly counter battery fire, but also with drones and so on and so forth. This is a big one. 1 aircraft, that's a Su-35, 4th generation multi-role fighter, pretty decent bit of kit. We'll talk about that in a second. 8 drones, 14 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 2 pieces of special equipment. We are now seeing almost up to 1 a day on average. That's how much the average is being skewed by the last month of hammering, particularly, I think, electronic warfare and surveillance kit. There's a lot of surveillance cameras that are mounted on masts and whatnot that have been taken out, and there's lots of video footage of kamikaze drones hitting them. Okay, so talking about last night, there were, I think, 20 Shahed drones. All 20 Shahed drones were apparently taken out. I think a number of them were aimed at Lviv, right in the west, but they were supposedly all taken out. However, 4 out of, 16? Let's count. So the Ukrainian Air Force says Russia launched 4 KH-101, KH-555, 5 KH-22, 2 Iskander-M, and 5 S-300 missiles, as well as 20 Shahed drones. So that is 4, 9, 11, 16. So that is 4 out of 16, which is a very low interception rate for missiles. But actually, when they're using 7 of those were ballistic missiles, and that they are, unless they've got Patriot working there, those are going to get through. So one would assume that all of those ballistic missiles were sent somewhere other than Kyiv. I don't know too much detail other than, well, we'll come to it in a little bit. There's certain towns that we know were hit, but other than that, I don't know too much about what the targets were and how successful the Russians were. Unconfirmed reports that a Su-35 multi-role fighter aircraft of the Russian Air Force was conducting combat operations against the Kherson region, so probably dropping those guided glide bombs was shot down by Ukrainian air defenses over the Black Sea. Su-35 was reportedly armed with, KAB 500S guided aerial bombs, which are being utilized against the air defense sites in the Kherson region. That's been happening a lot recently. Footage of what is claimed to be the Su-35 launching its guided bombs and flares off the coast of the Mykolaiv region at targets in Kherson before it was shot down. And then apparently it was shot down near, where was it? Zalizhny port. So that is there. Now that's 50 kilometers away from Kherson. I was talking probably a couple of weeks ago when they started using these guided glide bombs against the Ukrainians on the west bank of the river. The Ukrainians surely will get some decent bits of air defense kit around that area. I think they did get some, and then they were hit. They brought some forward. They were hit by the Russians. But you've surely got to get something with a decent bit of range that's out of the range of some of those Russian pieces, but still, out of the range of the Russian Air Force, but still able to hit the Air Force. So the longer range in the Air Force themselves in that area, because the Russians are causing the Ukrainians some real trouble around here. And I don't know whether this is an example, evidence of that taking place, a longer range air defense system being placed in the region and a decent Russian aircraft being taken out. That is pretty big news. Okay, 42,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed since Russia launched a full-scale invasion, according to a recent battlefield assessment multiple US officials told Fox News. This estimate is roughly 5 times greater than previously reported. That is huge. It's obviously a huge shame. It's terrible that civilians are dying at all in this senseless invasion. But I've always thought the numbers reported have been incredibly conservative. We'll see when the dust settles, when this war is over, and hopefully that is soon, what the true casualty number is for those Ukrainian civilians. Just looking at the verified losses in terms of what Oryx presents, so they do a day, not a daily, every 2 days they bring out their figures that they have assessed have been lost for the Russians and the Ukrainians. And it's just interesting at the moment. 17 losses for the Russians plays against 2 losses for the Ukrainians. Now, there could be some selection bias. It could be difficult to get hold of Ukrainian losses. There might be operational security that makes it harder for that footage to be released into the open source intelligence community domain. Or it could just be that at the moment the Russians are losing a lot more equipment to the tune of 8+ times the equipment that the Ukrainians have been losing. Now, recently there's been almost parity on some days with equipment lost. In fact, one day in the last month I reported that the Ukrainians lost more than the Russians. Of course, it doesn't mean that they lost that the day before. These aren't necessarily, chronologically relevant to the previous day or two. Sometimes you come across bits of equipment that have been found in a field that were blown up, 6 months ago, and that then gets added to these summaries. But you would assume that as the war goes on, there will be fewer and fewer of those examples, and it will be, there will be definitely a weighting towards equipment that's actually lost in the preceding days or week or so. So that's an interesting indication. And talking about the losses around Avdiivka, Andrew Perpetua talks about this happening around Pervomaisky. There's quite a bit of video footage of several attacks. In fact, that Javelin footage I showed you with my face was in front of where it took off, really close Javelin attack, that was in the area as well. There's a lot of footage coming out in the Avdiivka area showing heavy losses for the Russians, and that then leads into these kind of numbers, particularly with the APCs. So that's been heavy losses there, and those 2 losses for the Ukrainians on the Oryx summary there. You'll notice one's an F-103 Spartan, one's a BMP-1. I was meant to report that and I forgot it. It was on my tabs and I just missed pressing on it from about 4 days ago, I think it was. So that is a damaged F-103 Spartan and BMP in Bakhmut. So they were just picked up in Bakhmut by Wagner. And there indeed is the Spartan, provided by the UK. Probably, yeah. So that looks like that was provided by a private entity in the UK, possibly rather than the government. So going on to another loss here. This is a Ukrainian air defense loss. This is an autocannon, not not the biggest loss in terms of what could be lost with air defense, but it's still not great for the Ukrainians. This is interesting that this is a Russian quadcopter kamikaze drone. We haven't seen many of these. They usually use Lancets. I guess this is trying to copy what the Ukrainians are doing with their kamikaze drones. So there it is. That's the autocannon on the back of a truck getting taken out, destroyed by the Russians. Right. Moving on. I told you about the Berdyansk hits, and I think this is referring to not last night, but 2 nights ago when I told you Berdyansk was hit. But early in the morning, explosions and a fire occurred in Russian-controlled Berdyansk, Zaporizhia region. So that's on the coast between Mariupol and Crimea. Local authorities report that 4 Storm Shadows, this is what I wanted to tell you today, 4 Storm Shadow cruise missiles and 3 US-made AGM-160 MALD decoy missiles hit the city. So they're obviously really trying to get those Storm Shadows to hit their targets if they are also launching decoy missiles as well. And 4 Storm Shadow cruise missiles is quite considerable. They pack a punch. So Berdyansk, something serious was targeted in Berdyansk. That's why I'm sort of adding to that. As far as yesterday itself is concerned, another base has been hit in the Oleshki region. That's on the left bank of Dnipro, not too far from where that plane was taken down. Oleshki is pretty much opposite Kherson, the city of Kherson. So that's a significant hit there, as you can see. And another heavy explosion in the Mospurna, in the Donetsk region. Donetsk Oblast. It says that an ammunition storage has been hit, and that would match the explosion, says Tendar. Additionally, according to the source, a Pantsir air defense system, which is supposed to protect it, was also destroyed. That is very significant because Pantsirs are fairly decent. Yeah, there's a good 200, I think, have been constructed since they came into service, but some of those would have been exported. So I don't know how many Russia has, but that's good for a Pantsir to be taken out as well. Other hits, here's a railway station in Donetsk city. A big fire started after explosions were heard. This is again going to be softening up targets, softening up entire regions, certainly in terms of logistics capability for the Russians. So if they're going to be defending Zaporizhia, if they're going to be defending areas of Donetsk or Luhansk, you want to be hitting railway stations and junctions, so on and so forth. Russia are a railway army nation, and railways are super important for their ability to transport everything. So that will harm their ability to defend. And then we are moving into Russia. I think this is Voronezh in Russia. Substation was hit, and that then caused electricity to partially go down in the area. I'm expecting a lot more electrical substations near Russian-controlled electrified railway lines to be struck by waves of Ukrainian drones when the first 2023 Ukrainian counteroffensive kicks off. Russia set the rules of this war. It will get to live. It will get to live by them. So a fire in Voronezh Russian substation that was next to a power plant has broken out. Locals say they heard explosions prior to the fire. Electricity is partially down. And then again in Russia, the administrative building for the town of Golovchino in the Belgorod region, so that's again neighboring Ukraine, of Western Russia, is currently on fire, reportedly as a result of cross-border shelling by the Ukrainian armed forces. Shelling is sometimes a word that people use to also include things. I would always say shelling is artillery ammunition, but actually certain people report shelling as missiles, rockets. So it depends. I mean, it could well just be shelling, but it could also be sort of MLRS or any other kind of rocket. So or indeed missile. I've seen that term used for all sorts. So a bright light or explosion could be seen in Russian occupied Simferopol. So this is in Crimea now. Apparently, someone was saying it was like disco lights that speaks to electricity substations being hit with that sort of really bright white light. Let's go and dip into this imagery, and this has taken out electricity in the area. As you can see, it's all dark there, where it wouldn't have otherwise been. And see if there's an explode. There you go, in the background, just lighting up. Indicates electricity's involved. So that's in Simferopol. In Moscow, there's been a fire apparently near a military commissariat. So again, the kind of Russia on fire idea. Right. And when we come to the Russian hits on Ukraine, quite substantial, I think, in Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia. These are the places hit. Not unusual for some of those places, Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, to be hit, and Kharkiv to be hit by S-300s. So, yeah, what they've actually hit, what they've targeted, whether they've successfully hit military targets or critical infrastructure targets, you don't always know from Ukrainian media. They're quite tight operationally in terms of operational security. Last night, Russia launched a massive attack on Dnipro, destroying a local fire unit, injuring at least 8 civilians. And there you get evidence that at least a fire unit was hit, damaging a number of residential houses and other facilities. So 4 of 16 missiles were taken out, which isn't a great interception rate. And this is at least primary evidence that they have hit things that don't seem to be military targets. When you're using things like S-300 missiles, they are incredibly inaccurate when it comes to ground-to-ground mode. So, yeah, using the wrong type of weapon for the job. Rebar, pinch of salt and all that, but then you can say that about all the Ukrainian sources. Odessa, geraniums flying, and the explosions were powerful. This means that the hits are accurate and something on the ground is already exploding. So we haven't heard from Ukrainian sources, particularly, that anything in Odessa was hit. Heard in the areas of Kryzhanovka and Fontanka, Tyrov district, the houses were shaking and the windows almost blew out. But that's as much as I know. And then this made me sad because I have a feeling this might be the vehicle I reported on before. The mobile hospital I was building. So this is a Romanian guy that's collected loads of donations from Romania to build an armored hospital vehicle and some other vehicles, saying that the mobile hospital I was building from Romanians' donations was targeted and bombed by the Russians. I mean, what kind of humans do you have to be to target a hospital just because it's quite iconic, but it's a hospital bus? It was built on a civilian site by a civilian company in Kyiv. Nothing to do with military. A mobile hospital was building there, and that was being built there. And that's the damages. One worker who heard the Shahid and thought it was a generator and went outside to close it. Half of his body was burned. Administrative building of the company, 5 vehicles of the company. It was a Pimp My Ride company and a rent-a-car company. The main vehicle of the mobile hospital complex was hardly damaged, 25 meters away from the blast. And he goes on to give details of, civilian infrastructure. Now, what's interesting here is this is evidence of a Shahid drone hitting its target. But if that was part of last night's, and I don't know, that was 7:19 last night UK time. So was that part of the 20 drones? And if 20 drones were claimed to have been taken out, all 20 drones, then what does this say about the reporting of the Ukrainians in terms of 100% of the drones are taken out? Well, here's evidence of one found its target. Or was this from the night before? I don't know. So again, but targeting something like this that just makes me really angry. As if I could get angrier with the Russians, but there you go. Right, moving on to odds and sods, and this is kind of military news in terms of what's going on. So Bakhmut appears to have fallen, but then you know, as I said yesterday, then you had Zelensky at G7 announcing that actually it wasn't, and there were mixed messages coming from that. There's going to be a lot of trying to spin this. There could be activity for some Ukrainians really far into the southwestern corner there. That's going to be the likely last vestiges of the Ukrainian defense in the town itself. Uh, but then you get claims, yes, and I don't know if this is wholly accurate or trying to wrestle back the narrative. So the Ukrainians saying, the land forces chief says Ukrainian troops may soon encircle Bakhmut. Ukrainian troops keep advancing on the flanks and are approaching a tactical encirclement of Bakhmut in Donetsk Oblast, says Syrsky. So Syrsky appears to be very much alive. I reported yesterday we hadn't heard much from him. Then people messaged me saying, or put comments on the thread saying actually he's made this comment and that comment in the last week, so he seems to be alive. However, there are some serious rumors about Zaluzhny being in an induced coma and critically ill in a hospital in Kyiv. Now, those are rumors coming from Russians, but if you put on the socials, Zaluzhny injured, there's just a whole plethora of stuff. And actually, he hasn't been heard from since May the 8th. And there are claims from the Russians that his wife has visited him in a hospital, and they've got some kind of evidence of that. So that could be a significant bit of news. I'm not so worried now about Syrsky. I did mention yesterday, but I would give at least some credibility to the rumors that Zaluzhny could be critically injured. And that would be a massive, massive boon for the Russians. Now, you haven't heard that on the Russian kind of mainstream channels as far as I can work out. That is still just kind of rumor mill information, inverted commas. But I still think that is something to keep an eye on, personally myself. Okay, when it comes to Bakhmut, and it's important to see what other Russians think about this. So yeah, you got Wagner, not even officially actually. Wagner, even Prigozhin was quite. He's saying we're going to pull out, but he's also giving some respect to the Ukrainian defenders in Bakhmut. But it's mainly all the people around that, all the people on the open source intelligence, or not even that, just people on the socials. Russians, pro-Russian voices shouting about how wonderful it is that Bakhmut has fallen to the Russians. But then you go to someone like Igor Girkin, who is actually saying exactly what I've been saying for the last week or two, saying exactly the kind of accounts I've been giving, and that these are the kind of people you want to look to, which are people who are super invested in Russia winning, pro-Russian voices, ultra nationalists, but saying actually you're doing it wrong, and this is where it's going wrong. And I know people on the front line, and this is things aren't as good as you might think. And so Dmitry, War Translator, is translating a really long account that Evil Gherkin has given about Bakhmut. Gherkin says that Bakhmut battle was unnecessary and turned out to be a Pyrrhic victory. He notes that all Russian forces are now exhausted while trying to achieve at least some sort of victory for propaganda purposes. And this includes the people in the pro-Russians in my threads who talk about, oh, this is maximum copium, oh, you're coping. It's not. Look at the data, look at the strategies, look at the objectives, deal with my substantive claims. Don't just say this is cope and juvenile stuff like that. Tell me what is wrong with where I am wrong with my claims, and come back with some kind of substance yourself. So, and that would be to come back to what Gherkin is saying as well and rebut his claims, because they are aligned with mine. So he notes that the Russian forces are now exhausted while trying to achieve at least some sort of victory for propaganda purposes, and Ukraine is now in a position to deal several strikes where it wants, most likely to be met with weak Russian resistance. And he goes into four big long points, and then in the fifth he says, therefore I consider the victory near Bakhmut initially unnecessary, is a distraction to an unusable object. I wrote about this many times. In other words, it was kind of a pointless exercise anyway. Bakhmut doesn't lead you anywhere particularly, or it's just another place on the way to getting everywhere, but it doesn't have particular intrinsic value, and there were better places to attack. And then B, Pyrrhic It's not worth the effort and the money spent on it, even approximately. He's like, it's not even closely worth this. You know, not even nearly worth the effort in terms of resources and human life that the Russians have piled into that. And he says, hope to be wrong. I mean, you know, the best strike units of the Russian armed forces are exhausted by many months of battle. The stock of ammunition is minimal. If, for example, the enemy chooses the Donetsk front for attack, for example, the Mariupol direction, then he will be met by units and subunits badly battered and thinned by the transfer of reserves to Bakhmut. And if he decides to attack in the Zaporizhia front, he may not worry about the stability of his defense in the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction and near Avdiivka. So, you know, exactly the sort of stuff I've been saying. Yeah, and not just me, but you know, many people. This is the point of the Ukrainians defending Bakhmut, and Gherkin here sees that. Right, onto other bits and pieces. A mobilized Russian soldier who bought his own uniform, and he looks in quite a dirty state, this chap, and hadn't eaten in days, surrendered his military equipment in exchange for a chance to live in a normal country. Until now, the Panzer S1 system has not been handed over for a reward. So he's now handed over a Panzer S1. So these are these medium-range missile systems, that air defense systems that are pretty decent. They've been produced since 2008. They came into service in 2012, still in service. I think they've been upgraded to the S1 is the basic version, and then you know there are other variants on top of that. Medium range air defense system, and he's handed one over for a good square meal and a reward that you know Ukrainians are offering rewards for Russian soldiers doing this. So yeah, take it. He's done the calculation, eating that food there with his knife. But yeah, interesting bit of news that. So this onto again another completely different bit of news here. This is what the road in Butcher looked like at the height of the devastation in and around Butcher, and that's what it looks like now. Wow, what a great job they have done there. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Okay, this is the Patriarch Kirill, who is, you know, the Russian Orthodox Church. He was driving along in his Russian-made armored vehicle, like all snazzy, lots of money, drove into the side of a Volvo, known for its sturdiness, and the Volvo came off fairly badly, but not nearly as badly as the vehicle for Kirill. So I don't know what that says about Russian manufacturing, but that armored vehicle, I believe it's an armored vehicle that has, yeah, that kind of capability. Yeah, didn't come off particularly well. Anyway, just a little bit to add there. And this is the kind of conclusion that I think needs to be shouted from the rooftops, really, particularly in the US. So, for 5% of the American defense budget and zero American military casualties, the Ukrainians' military is destroying the Russian military, and that is absolutely in American interests. So, this is on CNN, Fareed Zakaria. I might have to dip into that interview in one of my extras, so we'll check that out later. Right, moving on to military aid. We have Prime Minister Kishida conveyed Japan's intention to newly provide around 100 self-defense force vehicles. The Japanese call their army self-defense force. It's all part of. Go and watch Perrin's video on Japan's army and its military strategy. Really, really interesting. Anyway, 100 self-defense force vehicles, unspecified model, such as a truck, and approximately 30,000 emergency rations. So they are helping out a little bit more overtly there. US President Joe Biden has not yet made a final decision on whether US will transfer F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine itself or whether allies will do it. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on CNN on Sunday. There's been some people who are kind of anti-Biden say the Biden administration is not doing X or the Biden administration is doing Y, whatever. Actually, it appears that it's not really the Biden administration. There seems to be different elements within that wanting different things. So on the one hand, you've got some elements wanting
X to happen, and then other elements holding back on that. They are all within the Biden administration. So there's some internal politics going on in there. And some people have been slagging off Jake Sullivan, as far as I can work out, for not being as forthcoming with F-16s, for example. But I think he is pro the US giving. I don't know. Someone can correct me on this. I think that the number of F-16s is a quote F-16s that are currently available in the warehouses of our European allies, and that based on the money that Congress has given us, there are so many other priorities in terms of systems that can be provided. We're going to focus more on third-party transfers, but the president hasn't made a final decision yet. So that's the kind of stuff that Jake Sullivan is saying that make people go, he's anti the US giving F-16s. Other people I've seen have been broadly supportive of some of the stuff he's been saying. So I think there's some internal dialogue going on within these administration officials. But it's not a done deal yet. So I was reporting that it looks like the Americans would leave the F-16s to be given by European and allied nations, and they'll just give the export permission. But actually, there's still elbow room for the US to give some of the F-16s themselves. I guess we'll see. And this is Joe Biden himself. Now, this has gone pretty viral. We'll see if you can hear this. Let's pump it up. Let's go to the beginning.
It is for them.
So I'll explain it because you won't have heard that. It's really difficult to hear the question. Is the supply of F-16 a colossal risk, as Russia claims? And he said it is for them. And that went viral because it's like drop mic moment. It's like, yeah, it's a risk. It's not a risk for us. It's a risk for those guys. It's a risk for Russia. And so sometimes Biden just does come up with the goods, with the odd witty remark or the on point remark here. And this is one of those moments, and that has gone quite viral. As loads of people are in Ukraine are loving what Biden did there, which is basically, if you read between the lines, it's like F-16s go, don't care what Russia say. It's a risk for them. They want to whinge about it, whatever. It's their problem. That's the kind of approach, and that's a lot of people are liking that. Soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine say goodbye to the Spanish military. We've seen this a lot, lining up and saluting. It's really great that the armed forces of the nations where these guys are training, in this case Spain, but we've seen this in the UK, we've seen this in Europe, form really positive relationships, and that breeds like support for Ukraine within the armed forces of these nations. So it's not just about public support, it's not just about government support, but here we've got the armed forces themselves, the personnel from these nations being hugely in support of what Ukraine are doing, and that's really good to see. And there's other footage of the buses leaving, and there being lines of Spanish saluting and whatnot. And I've shown you that kind of stuff before, but that continues there. Right, onto geopolitical stuff. Here we have Macron. He gets a lot of stick at times. I'm going to give him some props here. This is excellent from Macron on Ukraine. Quote, peace cannot be turning the situation into a frozen conflict. Experience teaches us that a frozen conflict will be a war for tomorrow. Peace must respect the UN Charter. Hopefully he puts to bed the harebrained scheme some have been trying to concoct. So Macron is sometimes criticized for trying to position himself as this like peace broker between China and Ukraine, and Russia and Ukraine, and he's been fairly unsuccessful in doing that. But he's starting to be at times much more robust in the positioning. And by the way, if you want to watch another really good video on the defense force, go and watch Perrin's latest video on the French armed forces. And we don't recognize quite how big the French armed forces are, because we live unless you're French or Belgian living in that area. If you're UK, everything's all about the UK in the news, and if you're in America, it's all about the US military, and if you whatever country you live in, everything's seen through a lens of your own media. But actually, the French are now the second biggest arms exporter in the world. They've got a really long history of decent military accomplishments. Now, we often think about headline things like the Napoleonic Wars and a failure eventually there, but actually there's an awful lot more to French history than what we in the UK have learned through when we've beaten them, right, in our wars. But we don't concentrate so much on when we lost against them and when X, Y, and Z has happened. And of course, you know, the French Empire, colonial empire, was extensive, and so you know that's all going to be wrapped up with their military. So anyway, go and watch Perrin's video on that. It really is superb. Macron, just to get off my sidetrack, is often saying exactly the right things. However, he's also talking about UN there, and the UN Security Council is a bit of a problem because you've got Russia as a permanent member on the Security Council. Which means that they are pretty much impotent in doing anything to do with this war. Well, the UN Security Council needs to be reformed in order to meet the realities of this time. This was reported by Reuters with reference to the statement of UN Security General Antonio Guterres. Now, he's one that people have been pretty critical of for being fairly toothless and not being strong enough in being critical of Russia. Well, actually, here to say these kind of things is super important. In the face of economic turmoil from the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the financial architecture has failed to fulfill its primary function of a global safety net. Also, what Guterres has said. So it would be absolutely vital going forward if Guterres is able to set in motion some form of reform to the Security Council. Is exactly what it needs. It's been reported that Brazil's president spurned Zelensky at the G7 summit. Lula refused a private meeting despite the urging of French President Macron. When asked if he was upset, Zelensky replied, "I think that he," that's Lula, "should be the one who is upset." That's a shame that Brazil seemed to be, yes, they're part of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but, there are elements where, well, they're caught between two competing hegemonies, but also between two competing needs for their own economy. You got the US and their relationships with the US in terms of the economy, and Russia in terms of fertilizer and everything they need for their massive agri business. So, yeah, but come on, Lula, sort it out. German police have been investigating mysterious illnesses of Russian activist journalist in Berlin. So it looks like the Russians are active in Europe in taking out certain players, as they have done. They've got a good track record or a bad track record for that. Think about Litvinenko in the UK and Skripal in the UK, so on and so forth. Possibility of Maidan number 3 this week. So Georgia, Serbia, and now Moldova. Although the vast majority of the latter are happy with their leadership. So this is Moldova. Pretty stunning pictures. I think 70,000 people came out in Moldova, pro-EU kind of positioning Moldova as looking westwards rather than eastwards, and that is really positive for positioning with regard to Ukraine, but the geopolitics of the whole region. Russia is indeed trying to foment discord in Moldova, and they have that annexed region of Transnistria on the eastern edges. And then similarly, stuff going on in Georgia. So Georgia Dream, which is the ruling government in Georgia, has got a fairly pro-Russian stance, but there are different politicians who are pro-West and pro-EU. Is there a difference between the president there and the prime minister? Is it the president that's not? I don't know. I need to look into that. President Zurabishvili could be pro-West. I'm not sure. So, okay, what's the issue here? Lavrov's daughter, who is Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, his daughter has been sanctioned. Lavrov's been sanctioned. These are all sanctioned by the US, the EU, the UK, France. His daughter came to Georgia with relatives and basically, I think, rented out an entire hotel ready for this a wedding and a wedding party. She came to a wedding and booked the entire hotel where Georgians protested outside. President Zurabishvili intervened and cancelled the wedding. Lavrov's relatives were expelled from the country. There were huge protests outside. This is on the back of Georgia deciding to open up the air to flights between Russia and Georgia again. CNN has reported on this. Police in Georgia removed protesters who targeted a hotel following reports relatives of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov were staying there in defiance of sanctions, so on and so forth. The protest came after Georgian media reported that Lavrov's relatives, including the daughter Ekaterina Vinokurova, had traveled to Georgia for the wedding of the brother of Lavrov's son-in-law, Alexandre Vinokurov. Georgian president told a briefing Saturday she had been informed by her Minister of Internal Affairs, Vakhtang Gamaluri, that Lavrov's relatives had left the country. The public broadcaster reported she did not specify when the relatives arrived in and left Georgia. Vinokurova, who is married to Vinokurov, has been sanctioned by the UK, US, and Canada, while her businessman husband has been sanctioned by the EU. So that's the detail there. Zurabishvili expressed disbelief that the country's government didn't know, quote, the daughter of the highest ranking official from Putin's immediate circle who is under sanctions had entered Georgia, and stressed that they had a responsibility to know who has entered the country's territory for state protection, according to the First Channel. She also urged the government to pay attention to the list of Russian individuals sanctioned by their partner countries as a way of protecting Georgia. And this is the dynamic. So I think, the president is of a different political persuasion in terms of being more westward looking than the ruling government. And you've got quite a lot of discord going on in Georgia as it's kind of dealing with the Russian influence and where it kind of wants to go, geopolitically speaking, in the future. Anyway, that's the news for today. Sorry, loads of stuff going on. So it's quite a long one. Please excuse my early morning brain. Take care, and I'll speak to you later.